Most husbands discover their marriage is ending long after everyone else already knows. I discovered mine at a dinner invitation. Not because my wife confessed. Not because I found messages on her phone, and not because some anonymous stranger decided to play hero. I knew because of the way she smiled. After 12 years of marriage, I had learned something most people never understand. Words lie, faces lie, but patterns don't, and the pattern had changed. My name is Nathan Mercer. 3 years ago, my wife tried to trade our future for a richer one. What she didn't know was that I had spent most of my life uncovering secrets for a living, and hers wasn't nearly as hidden as she thought. But before I tell you about the dinner that changed everything, you need to understand how I got there. Because this story didn't start with betrayal. It started with a secret my mother took to her grave. Tuesday evenings were usually predictable. I liked predictable. Predictable paid my bills. Predictable kept life simple. That particular Tuesday, I was sitting in my home office reviewing financial reports from a corporate fraud case. Numbers had always made sense to me. People rarely did. I had built an entire career as a forensic accountant. Companies hired me when millions of dollars mysteriously disappeared. Banks hired me when executives swore they had done nothing wrong. Lawyers hired me when somebody's story smelled funny. Most of the time, the money told the truth long before people did. I was halfway through a spreadsheet when my wife stepped into the room. "Working late again?" she asked. I looked up. Emily leaned against the doorway, holding a glass of wine. She looked beautiful, she always had. Dark hair, bright eyes, the kind of effortless confidence that made strangers trust her immediately. 12 years earlier, that confidence had attracted me. Now, it made me cautious. Because lately she'd been using that smile more often. And usually when Emily smiled like that, she wanted something. "Almost done," I said. She nodded. Then she delivered the sentence that would change everything. "Damien wants to take us to dinner Friday." I stopped typing, not visibly, not enough for her to notice. But internally, every alarm bell I possessed started ringing. Damien Blackwell, her boss. "Almost done," I said. She nodded. Then she delivered the sentence that would change everything. "Damien wants to take us to dinner Friday." I stopped typing, not visibly, not enough for her to notice. But internally, every alarm bell I possessed started ringing. Damien Blackwell, her boss. "No," she laughed awkwardly. "I mean, most husbands would probably find it weird." I shrugged. "He's your boss." She studied my face, looking for something: suspicion, jealousy, anger, anything. I gave her nothing. Eventually, she smiled. "Great." Then she left. The moment the door closed, I leaned back in my chair, because Damien Blackwell wasn't the reason I was concerned, not really. The real problem was timing. 6 months earlier, my private investigation into a completely unrelated matter had uncovered a name I never expected to see. Blackwell. At the time, it meant nothing. Now, it meant everything. And suddenly, dinner felt less like a social invitation, and more like a move on a chessboard. My mother raised me alone. She never complained about it. Never blamed anyone. Never played the victim. Her name was Grace Mercer, and she was the strongest person I've ever known. Growing up, I asked about my father exactly 3 times. The first time, I was 7. The second time, I was 11. The third time, I was 17. Each time she gave the same answer. "One day," that's all she'd say. "One day." Then she'd change the subject. After a while, I stopped asking. Some questions hurt the people you love. And I loved my mother. So I let the mystery remain a mystery. Until her final week, she was 60-8. Cancer had stolen almost everything: her strength, her appetite, her energy, but not her mind. Her mind remained sharp until the very end. 3 nights before she passed away, she asked me to sit beside her hospital bed. I remember every detail. The sound of the monitor, the smell of disinfectant, the way rain tapped against the window. "Nathan," her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I'm here." She smiled weakly. "There are things you need to know." I felt my stomach tighten, because I already knew where this conversation was heading. My father. She nodded. For a long moment, she simply stared at the ceiling, as if replaying memories only she could see. Finally, she spoke. His name is Richard Blackwell. The room went silent. I recognized the name instantly, everybody did. Richard Blackwell, founder of Blackwell Capital. Billionaire. Business icon, financial legend, and, apparently, my father. I stared at her, unable to process what I'd heard. Tears filled her eyes. We were young. What happened? She looked away. He chose his future. That was all she said. Not because she didn't remember. Because she didn't want bitterness to be her final gift. But she did tell me one more thing. He has a son. I waited. His name is Damien. And suddenly the world shifted. Because Damien Blackwell wasn't just my wife's boss. He was my half-brother. After my mother died, I spent nearly a year researching. Not obsessively, professionally, methodically. The way I approached every investigation, piece by piece, document by document, fact by fact, and eventually, a picture emerged. Richard Blackwell was dying. Very few people knew it, but he was. Terminal illness, limited time, complicated estate planning. Lawyers moving quietly behind closed doors, and one particularly interesting detail. His will had recently been modified. That alone wouldn't have caught my attention. Except for one thing. The modification occurred only weeks after private investigators located my mother. Too late to speak with her, but not too late to learn about me. That changed everything. Because if Richard intended to acknowledge another heir, someone stood to lose a fortune. Someone named Damien. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Then, Emily started working directly under him. Then the late meetings began. Then the private business dinners. Then the secretive phone calls. And, eventually, the invitation. Friday night. 1, dinner. 3, people. 2, many secrets. I didn't know exactly what Damien wanted, but I knew one thing. It wasn't friendship, and whatever game he was playing. I was finally about to see the board. The next 48 hours moved slowly. Painfully slowly. Emily seemed nervous, checking her phone constantly. Distracted, restless. Meanwhile, I prepared. Not because I planned to start a fight, quite the opposite. The best investigators never rush, they wait. People reveal themselves eventually. All you have to do is stay quiet long enough. By Friday evening, I was ready. Dark suit. Polished shoes. Calm expression. The same expression I'd worn during million-dollar fraud investigations. Emily looked stunning. She always did. For a brief moment, I remembered why I married her. The road trips, the late-night conversations, the first apartment, the dreams we'd built together, and for one dangerous second. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped every suspicion was paranoia. I hoped dinner would be boring, normal, forgettable. But deep down, I already knew better. Because instincts don't appear from nowhere. They grow from evidence. And I had spent months collecting evidence. As we pulled into the restaurant parking lot, Emily reached for my hand. A gesture she hadn't made in weeks, maybe months. I looked at her, she smiled. And suddenly I realized something. She wasn't comforting me. She was comforting herself. That realization hurt more than I expected. Inside, Damien was already waiting. Standing beside our table. Perfect suit, perfect smile, perfect confidence. The confidence of a man accustomed to getting whatever he wanted. The moment he saw Emily, his expression changed. Only slightly, but enough. Most people wouldn't have noticed. I did, because noticing tiny details was literally my profession. And in that split second, I saw exactly how he felt about my wife. Then he turned toward me, extending his hand. Nathan, it's great to finally meet you. I shook it. Firm grip, steady eye contact, polite smile, and as our hands met, I had the strangest feeling. Like I wasn't shaking hands with a stranger. Like I was shaking hands with family. Family that didn't know who I was. Yet, as the appetizers arrived and wine was poured, Damien leaned toward Emily and whispered something she clearly wasn't meant to repeat. She laughed. Then she looked at me, and for the first time all night, she looked guilty. What happened over the next 30 minutes would expose a secret worth hundreds of millions of dollars and leave all three of us trapped at the same table. There are moments in life when everything changes. Not with an explosion, not with shouting, not with drama, but with silence. The kind of silence that settles into a room and waits. Dinner started normally enough. Expensive restaurant, soft piano music, dim lighting. The kind of place where the waiters somehow appear exactly when you need them and disappear the moment you don't. Damien ordered wine without looking at the menu. That told me two things. First, he came here often. Second, he wanted us to know it. People with real power rarely announce it. People who need you to notice it always do. The wine arrived. The conversation began. And for the first 20 minutes, everything looked perfectly normal. Damien asked about my work. I asked about the markets. Emily laughed at jokes that weren't particularly funny. To anyone watching, we looked like three successful adults enjoying an evening together. But underneath the surface, something felt off. Because Damien wasn't talking to me. Not really. Every question he asked seemed carefully chosen. Every response seemed measured, like he wasn't learning about me. He was evaluating me, studying me, testing me. And the more I watched him, the more certain I became. This dinner wasn't social, it was strategic. The question was why. Halfway through the main course, I finally saw it. A look, just a look. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, but enough. Emily reached for her wine glass. At exactly the same moment, Damien looked up. Their eyes met. For less than a second, then both looked away. Most husbands would miss it. Most people would. I didn't. Because hidden relationships aren't exposed by grand gestures. They're exposed by unconscious habits. And that glance carried familiarity, comfort, history. The kind that develops over time, not weeks, not months, maybe longer. I felt something tighten in my chest, not anger, not yet, just confirmation, a suspicion becoming reality. Still, I remained calm. Because reacting too early is how people lose. Patience wins more battles than emotion ever will. So I smiled, asked another question, and let them keep talking. Dessert menus arrived. Emily excused herself to the restroom. The moment she disappeared around the corner, Damien relaxed. Only slightly, but enough for me to notice. He picked up his wine glass, took a slow sip, then smiled. You seem surprisingly calm. I looked at him. About what? He shrugged. Most men would be intimidated. By what? His smile widened. The position I'm in. There it was. The real Damien. Not the charming executive, not the friendly boss. The man underneath. The man who enjoyed reminding people of power differences. I leaned back. You think I should be intimidated? He laughed. Not intimidated. A pause. Concerned, maybe double quotes, interesting. Very interesting, because that wasn't a normal thing to say. Not to your employee's husband, not over dinner, not unless the message carried a second meaning. And suddenly, I realized something. He wanted me uncomfortable, wanted me uncertain, wanted me questioning my place. The problem was, I already knew something he didn't. I knew who his father was, and I knew who I was. When Emily returned, Damien immediately shifted back into his polished executive persona. The transition was impressive. Almost seamless, almost the rest of the world might have missed it. I didn't. The three of us continued talking, but now I was paying attention to different things. Tiny things, body language, eye contact, patterns, and the patterns told a story. Every time Emily spoke, Damien focused entirely on her. Every time I spoke, his attention drifted, subtle, but consistent, like gravity. Eventually, the truth became impossible to ignore. He wasn't interested in our marriage. He was interested in my wife. The only question remaining was whether Emily felt the same. Unfortunately, I wouldn't have to wait long for that answer. Near the end of dinner, Emily's phone vibrated. She glanced down, then immediately locked the screen. Too quickly, a reflex, the kind people develop when hiding something. Damien saw it to ... and for a fraction of a second, panic flashed across his face, then disappeared. That was enough. I didn't know what message had arrived, but I knew it mattered. And suddenly, every piece began fitting together. Late meetings, private dinners, secretive behavior, nervous smiles, guilty expressions. The puzzle was almost complete. I just needed one final piece, and then it happened. A mistake. The kind people make when they become too comfortable. The waiter arrived with coffee. As he stepped away, Damien leaned slightly toward Emily, just slightly, and spoke quietly. Too quietly for most people to hear, but not for me, because years ago, while investigating an international fraud case, I'd spent months learning German. At first for work. Later, because I enjoyed it, neither Damien nor Emily knew that. Which was unfortunate for them, because the moment he spoke, I understood every word. "Everything's fine," he said in German. He's completely clueless. My pulse slowed, not sped up. Slowed, the way it always did before a critical discovery. Emily glanced at me, then answered. Also in German. "Don't underestimate him," Damien smiled. "I've looked into him." A pause. "Trust me." Then came the sentence that changed everything. The sentence that transformed suspicion into certainty. The sentence I'll never forget. "He won't be a problem much longer." For a moment, the entire restaurant seemed to disappear. The music, the conversations, the waiters, gone. All I could hear was that sentence. "He won't be a problem much longer." Not your husband, not Nathan. A problem. That's what I was, an obstacle. Something standing in the way of whatever they wanted. And suddenly, the dinner invitation made perfect sense. This wasn't about friendship. It wasn't about business. It wasn't even about an affair. It was about positioning, control, strategy. They believed they were planning the future. And they believed I had no idea. I waited. 5 seconds. 10.15. Long enough for them to relax. Long enough for them to believe their secret remained safe. Then I set down my coffee cup, looked directly at Damien. And spoke in flawless German. "You should be careful who you call a problem." Everything stopped. Everything. Damien froze. Emily stopped breathing. Or at least it looked that way. Neither moved. Neither spoke. The shock on their faces was almost unbelievable. Because in a single sentence, their entire advantage disappeared. I watched the color drain from Damien's face. Slowly. Then all at once. "You speak German," I smiled. "Quite well." The silence that followed felt endless. Around us, the restaurant continued normally. Nobody else knew a war had just begun. Nobody else knew 3 lives had changed forever. Emily stared at me. Horror filling her eyes. Not because she'd been caught, because she suddenly realized how much I might know. And how long I might have known it. Damien recovered first. I expected that. Powerful men usually do. They've spent their lives adapting, recovering, controlling narratives. But this time his recovery came too late. Because I wasn't finished, not even close. I looked directly into his eyes. Then said the words I'd waited nearly a year to speak. "How is your father?" The reaction was immediate. Pure instinct, pure shock, pure fear. "What?" "Richard Blackwell." I maintained eye contact. "How is he?" Emily looked between us. Completely lost. Damien had gone pale. Actually pale. The way people do when something impossible happens. "How do you know my father?" I smiled. Not because I was happy, because I finally understood. He didn't know. All this time, he didn't know. Richard Blackwell had never told him. The old man had found me. Changed his will. Started preparing for the truth. And Damien remained completely unaware. That realization changed everything, because now I understood the fear in his eyes. He wasn't afraid of me exposing an affair. He was afraid of something much bigger. Something worth hundreds of millions. I stood, slowly, calmly. The same way I'd stood after closing major investigations. The same way I'd stood before delivering devastating reports. Nathan, Emily began. I raised a hand, not aggressively, just enough to stop her. Then I looked at Damien. We need to talk. His jaw tightened. I agree. Not here. A long pause. Then he nodded. For the first time all night, the confidence was gone. The superiority was gone. The control was gone. Now he looked like a man who had just realized he wasn't playing the game alone, and that maybe, just maybe, someone else understood the rules better than he did. I placed enough cash on the table to cover my portion, then turned toward the exit. Behind me, neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke, because they both understood the dinner was over. The real story was just beginning. At 9:17 the next morning, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. When I answered, a weak voice spoke for words that made my blood run cold. Nathan, this is Richard. The father I had never met was calling. And what he told me next would expose a family secret far darker than an affair. The next morning felt unusually quiet, not peaceful, just quiet in the way a city feels before a storm arrives. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had already gone cold, replaying every second of the previous night. Emily hadn't come home. Not that I expected her to. After what happened at the restaurant, there wasn't much left to say. At exactly 9:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I ignored unknown numbers. That morning, I answered, hello. For a second, there was only breathing. Then a weak voice spoke. Nathan, this is Richard. Every muscle in my body went still. 30-8 years. 38 years of questions. 38 years of wondering what kind of man could walk away from a child. And suddenly, he was on the phone. Not as a mystery. Not as a name in old documents. Not as a billionaire businessman. As a person, a real person, my father. I wasn't sure you'd answer, he said. His voice sounded tired. Older than I expected, like every word required effort. I stared out the kitchen window. I wasn't sure you'd call. A quiet laugh escaped him. Fair enough. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. What exactly do you say to someone who's been absent your entire life? There isn't a handbook for that. Finally, he broke the silence. You met Damien. It wasn't a question. Yes, and now you know. I know enough. Another pause. Then came the sentence I never expected to hear. I'm sorry. I closed my eyes. Not because it fixed anything, because I'd spent years imagining this moment. In every version, he defended himself, made excuses, blamed circumstances. Instead, he apologized. Simple, direct, no explanation, just regret. And somehow, that made it harder, not easier. Because anger is easy. Complicated emotions are not. I'd like to meet you, he said quietly. I looked down at my coffee. Why now? His answer came immediately. Because I'm running out of time. The honesty in that sentence hit harder than I expected. No manipulation, no dramatic speech, just truth. The kind people tell when they realize they no longer have enough time to lie. 2 days later, I walked into St. Andrew's Medical Center. The hospital smelled like every hospital I'd ever visited. Disinfectant. Coffee. Worry. A nurse directed me toward a private room on the 7th floor. As I approached the door, I felt something unfamiliar. Fear. Fear. Fear of the man inside. Fear of what meeting him might change. For most of my life, my father had been a blank space. A mystery. Mysteries are easier than reality. Reality has consequences. After a long breath, I knocked. Come in. The voice was weak. I opened the door, and there he was, Richard Blackwell. The man whose photograph had appeared in magazines for decades. The man who built a financial empire. The man who had never attended a birthday. Never watched a school graduation. Never taught me how to drive. He looked smaller than I expected. Illness had reduced him. But his eyes remained sharp. The same steel-gray eyes I saw every morning in the mirror. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled sadly. You have your mother's eyes. The words hit me harder than they should have, Because for the first time, he wasn't talking about himself, he was talking about her. About Grace, the woman who deserved so much better. I pulled a chair closer and sat down. Richard studied me quietly, then nodded. You're exactly who she raised you to be. My chest tightened. You don't know who she raised me to be. No, he admitted, I don't. His honesty surprised me again. No pretending, no performance, just truth. And somehow, that made the room feel heavier. After nearly an hour of conversation, Richard finally shifted in his bed, slowly reaching toward a sealed envelope resting on the bedside table. His hand trembled slightly. When he handed it to me, his expression changed. More serious, more cautious. What's this? A truth Damien doesn't know. I looked down at the envelope, then back at him. What truth? Richard sighed. A tired, painful sigh. The inheritance isn't why you need to be careful. A chill ran through me. What do you mean? He stared toward the window for several seconds before answering. Damien believes this is about money. His eyes returned to mine. But money stopped being the problem a long time ago. The room suddenly felt smaller. What aren't you telling me? His jaw tightened. For the first time since I arrived, genuine worry crossed his face. Someone inside my company has been stealing millions. I frowned. You think it's Damien? No. The answer came immediately. Too immediately. Richard looked genuinely troubled. That's what scares me. I stared at him. If it isn't Damien. His eyes locked onto mine. Then he spoke words that sent a cold wave through my entire body. Because whoever is doing it wants both of my sons blaming each other. Silence filled the room. The envelope suddenly felt much heavier in my hands. And for the first time since this entire nightmare began, I realized Emily's affair might be the smallest problem in my life. As I opened the envelope, a single photograph slipped onto my lap. The moment I saw the face in that picture, my blood turned cold, because I knew that person, and they had been much closer to me than anyone could have imagined. The photograph slipped from the envelope and landed face up on my lap. The moment I saw it, my stomach dropped. It was Emily, my wife, standing beside a man I didn't recognize. The picture looked recent, taken perhaps 6 months earlier. They were exiting a downtown office building together. Nothing romantic, nothing obvious. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was the date printed on the back. The photograph had been taken nearly 3 months before Emily claimed she'd ever met Damien Blackwell. She had lied, not just about the affair, about the beginning, about everything. I looked up at Richard. What is this? His face remained serious. The man beside her is Marcus Hale. The name meant nothing to me. Richard noticed he was one of my senior financial officers. Richard nodded slowly. He disappeared 8 months ago. A chill moved through me. What do you mean, disappeared? I mean he resigned without notice, emptied several accounts connected to shell companies, and vanished. I stared at the photograph again. Emily looked comfortable beside him, too comfortable. Like this wasn't their first meeting, or their 10th. Richard leaned forward slightly. When my investigators started tracing missing funds, Marcus's name kept appearing. My grip tightened around the picture, and Emily. Richard hesitated. Her name appeared to the room, went silent. I wanted to reject it immediately, to call it impossible. But the evidence sitting in my hands made that difficult. Are you saying she helped him? I'm saying I don't know. Richard's voice was calm. That's why I need your help. I looked at him carefully. Why me? A faint smile appeared on his face. Because you're the only person involved who follows facts before emotions. I wished he wasn't right. For several seconds, I stared at the photograph. My wife, a missing executive, millions of dollars, a hidden inheritance, and somehow, all of it was connected. Then I noticed something else. A reflection in the office window behind them. A third person, barely visible, almost hidden but recognizable. My heart skipped a beat, because the man reflected in that glass wasn't a stranger, it was Damien, watching them. If Damien knew about Marcus, and Marcus knew Emily, Then someone had been lying from the very beginning. The only question was Damien covering up the theft? Or was he the next target? My phone rang. Emily. For several seconds, I simply stared at the screen. 3 days ago, I would have answered immediately. Now, I wasn't sure what to say. Eventually, I picked up hello silence. Then her voice, Nathan. She sounded exhausted, not emotional, not dramatic. Just tired. I need to talk to you. I leaned back in my chair. About what? A long pause followed. Then she said something I never expected. Marcus Hale. Every nerve in my body went alert. I sat up immediately. What about him? You need to stop looking into him. The room became very quiet. Not because of what she said. Because of how she said it. She sounded afraid. Genuinely afraid. Why? Another pause. Nathan, please. That wasn't an answer. Why, Emily? I heard her breathing. Then finally, because he's dangerous. I frowned. Dangerous? How? He isn't who you think he is. The fear in her voice was unmistakable now. For the first time since this nightmare began, she sounded less like someone hiding secrets and more like someone trapped by them. Did you help him steal the money? I asked. Immediately, she answered. No. Too fast to be rehearsed. Too emotional to be calculated. No, Nathan, I swear I didn't. I wanted to believe her. Part of me still did. But trust doesn't repair itself overnight. If you didn't help him, why are you protecting him? I'm not protecting him. Her voice cracked. I'm trying to protect you. The words hung in the air. Protect me. From what? Before I could ask, she spoke again. Have you looked at the photograph carefully? My stomach tightened. Yes. No, you haven't. The certainty in her voice stopped me cold. Look at the timestamp, I frowned. What? The timestamp, Nathan. Then the line went silent. For a moment I thought the call had disconnected, but she was still there, waiting. I quickly grabbed the photograph from my desk, my eyes moved to the bottom corner, and suddenly my heart skipped a beat. Because the timestamp revealed something impossible. Something that changed everything. The photograph had been taken 2 weeks after Marcus Hale officially disappeared, which meant only one thing. Either the records were false, or Marcus Hale had never disappeared at all. As I stared at the timestamp, another realization hit me. If Marcus was alive, then someone had spent 8 months convincing the world he was gone. And people don't fake disappearances unless they're hiding from something, or preparing for something much worse. I barely slept that night. The timestamp kept replaying in my mind. Marcus Hale was supposed to be missing. Yet the photograph proved he had been seen weeks later. Someone was lying. The next morning, I received an email from an anonymous address. No message, no greeting. Just a single attachment. A scanned document. My pulse quickened as I opened it. It was a bank record. More specifically, a rental agreement for a safe deposit box. The renter's name, Marcus Hale, but that wasn't what caught my attention. The location did. The box was located less than 20 minutes from my house. And according to the document, the rental fee had been paid only 4 days ago. Marcus was alive. Not only alive, active, someone wanted me to know it. The question was why. At the bottom of the email was a short sentence. Ask Damien about box 417. That was it. No signature, no explanation. Just those 4 words. I immediately called Damien. He answered on the second ring. Nathan. His voice sounded tense, as if he had been expecting my call. What's in box 417? Silence. Complete silence. For nearly 5 seconds, then Damien spoke. And for the first time since we'd met, I heard genuine fear in his voice. Who told you about that? I stood from my desk. What's inside, Damien? Another pause, then a slow exhale. If Marcus still has that box, his voice dropped almost to a whisper. We're all in danger. A chill ran down my spine. Why? Damien's answer was immediate. Because that's where he hid the evidence. Before I could ask another question, the call disconnected. And seconds later, A text message appeared on my phone from an unknown number. It contained only an address and one warning: get there before they do. As I stared at the address, I realized it belonged to the same bank that housed safe deposit box 417. Someone was already moving, and if the evidence disappeared before I arrived, the truth might vanish with it forever. I left immediately. The address from the text message led to a private bank on the north side of the city. The entire drive, my mind raced: who sent the email, who sent the text, and more importantly, who was trying to reach box 417 before me. By the time I arrived, dark clouds had covered the sky. The bank's parking lot looked almost empty. Almost a black SUV sat near the entrance with its engine running. I didn't recognize it, but something about it felt wrong. I entered the bank and approached the front desk. I need access to safe deposit box 417. The employee frowned. I'm sorry, sir. Someone already requested access 10 minutes ago. My stomach dropped. Who? She shook her head. I can't provide that information. Too late. I was too late. Then I heard shouting. Coming from the hallway behind the vault area, everyone in the lobby froze. A security guard rushed past us, then another. Something was happening fast. The employee looked frightened. A moment later, the vault door burst open. A man in a dark jacket sprinted into the lobby carrying a small metal case. For 1 second our eyes met, and I recognized him immediately. Marcus Hale, alive, very much alive. He looked shocked to see me. I was equally shocked to see him. Then he shouted something I couldn't quite hear and ran toward the exit. The security guards chased after him, but before he reached the doors, Marcus turned and threw the metal case across the lobby, directly toward me. I barely caught it. Seconds later, he disappeared outside. Gone. The entire bank erupted into chaos. Alarms, shouting, running footsteps. And in the middle of it all, I stood there holding the contents of box 417. A box Marcus had risked everything to protect. Slowly, I opened the case. Inside was a flash drive and a handwritten note. 3 words were written across the front. Trust no one. When I plugged the flash drive into my laptop that night, I expected financial records. What I found instead was a video. And the person speaking in that video was someone I never suspected. Someone who had been standing beside me from the very beginning. I waited until I got home before inserting the flash drive into my laptop. Every instinct I had told me to be careful. Marcus Hale had risked his freedom to get that case into my hands. Whatever was on it mattered. The drive contained dozens of files, financial records, transaction histories, internal emails, enough evidence to destroy careers. But one file stood out. A video labeled, "Watch this first." I clicked it. The screen flickered. Then Marcus appeared. He looked exhausted, unshaven, nervous. Like a man who hadn't slept properly in months. He stared directly into the camera. If you're watching this, things have gone worse than I expected. A chill ran through me. Marcus took a breath. They'll tell you I stole the money. He shook his head. I didn't. My eyes narrowed. Then who did? Marcus seemed to anticipate the question. The missing funds were moved through accounts I controlled, but I wasn't the mastermind. He leaned closer to the camera. I was following orders. My pulse quickened. Orders from who? For several seconds, Marcus remained silent, as though gathering courage. Then he finally spoke the name, and the room seemed to stop spinning. Richard Blackwell. I froze. My father, the dying man in the hospital. The man who claimed he wanted to make things right. Marcus continued. Everything started with Richard. Every transfer, every account, every cover-up. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Either Marcus was lying, or my father had hidden a secret far darker than anyone imagined. Then the video ended. Just like that. No explanation. No proof. Only an accusation. And one final folder on the flash drive labeled, "For Nathan only." My hand hovered over the mouse. Because suddenly I wasn't sure I wanted to know the truth anymore. When I opened the folder, I found a document, signed by Richard Blackwell himself. And at the very bottom was a sentence that changed everything. If this document is being read, then someone has already betrayed me.